Hello, Hearties, it's Catherine here, and today I want to talk to you about something that we used to talk about a lot in my previous sort of sales career when I worked in sales roles myself. And this is about the importance of keeping your potential client inside your sales bubble. So, what I mean by this is that when your potential client comes to that conversation about potentially working with you, where they've come to explore whether working with you feels right for them or not, to find out more information, they are coming fully focused in this sort of bubble of making that decision. And if you underestimate that or underestimate the power of that sales bubble, then you can risk damaging the chances of actually enabling that person to come to a decision. Because anything that you bring into that conversation that takes them outside of the sales bubble can potentially take them away from the sale. So, as an example of this, your potential client might be fully engaged in that conversation, processing all of the information that you're sharing in the context of, am I going to do this? Am I not going to do this? Does this sound valuable? How am I going to pay for it? All of this thinking, he or she is fully in this sales bubble. But if you allow a conversation to go off on a tangent, usually because you take it on a tangent, so a client who is fully immersed in the sales bubble and in making the decision is actually unlikely to take you off on a different tangent. It's usually something that you would end up doing yourself as the business owner. So maybe somewhere within that sales conversation, the potential client talks about their dog, and they make casual reference to having taken their dog to Cornwall last week. Now, if you pick up on that and ask, I love dogs, what sort of dog have you got? Oh, Cornwall, which part of Cornwall? Oh, we were there too the other week, blah, blah. You can very quickly take this conversation outside of the bubble and into general conversation, and it will be very nice. You both will have a nice time. You'll feel that you've had a great connection, but the client won't have continued down that route of making the decision. So there's a really fine line. There is a fine line because you do need to establish some rapport. And so what I normally suggest is that the place for rapport establishing actually comes in the early part of the sales conversation. So after you set the agenda and you start going into step 2, which is when you're starting to find out more about them and ask questions that are not too searching, this is the perfect place to find a little bit of shared common ground. Maybe this is when they mention that they went to Cornwall. It'll be totally fine for you to say, oh, which part? Oh, we were there last week as well. Wasn't it glorious weather? And then you bring them back to the conversation. You bring them back to that pathway. So within the 7 steps to yes, that journey that you guide the client on, I often refer to that as a pathway that you're guiding them on. You bring them back onto that path. So you can do it to build rapport. However, if you bring that in later on, in any of the later steps, you take the client out of the bubble and off the path. I'm mixing my metaphors here, aren't I? But I think you get the picture. Maybe 2 metaphors helps a little bit. It's a bubble and a path, whichever is the easiest way for you to think about it. And as soon as they have left that bubble, they're no longer in that, am I going to do this, am I not going to do it zone. So within the sales conversation, it's important that you stay very conscious of keeping them within that bubble of the sales conversation and not allowing the conversation to drift off outside the bubble, because once it leaves the bubble, it can be very, very difficult to bring it back on track. Understanding this can also really help you in those sales conversations. You know how sometimes you come away from a sales conversation and you are just really confused because you don't know what you did wrong, you don't know why that person didn't go ahead and work with you. And I talk a lot about the sense of control you have in sales when you're able to easily understand what happened and why they didn't work with you. And this is one of those signs. So if you're in the sales conversation and you're leading that client through step 3, explore problem, through step 4, testing commitment, through step 5, the compelling solution, through step 6, where you present your offer, you state the price, and then you invite them to go ahead. If while you're taking them through that conversation, the client themselves keeps going off on a different track and leaving the bubble, their thought process is taking them off on some meandering tangent, and they're talking about things that are totally unrelated to the actual anything that's directly relevant to your sales conversation and their decision to work with you, then you know that that client isn't really engaged in that conversation, that they have not really, they've not really connected into it. They're not in their decision-making process. They are not in the sales bubble. And it can give you that hint. You know, when it happens to me, I think, okay, I'm not going to just abort the sales conversation, but I have a really good feeling at this point that this person isn't really as serious as I might have thought they were at the beginning. So just a word of warning, build your rapport in step 2, find some common ground. Don't let the conversation drift off too much though, but find your common ground in your rapport. But once you get into step 3 and beyond, don't say anything or ask any questions that are unrelated to the sales conversation itself, that would take their attention and focus away from the decision and onto something else. So I hope you found this useful and this all makes sense. Please do type in the comments below and let me know how you have found this. You know I always love to hear from you. I read all of the comments. I try and reply to them all, but I know I don't always quite manage to do all of them. And I look forward to seeing you very soon for the next video. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.